I'm going to spare you. This group is a little too large. My normal teacher instinct would be to ask you to all introduce yourselves, but I don't want to spend half of our time doing that. But I'd love to do a quick poll just to get a sense. If there are any teachers or principals in the crowd, could you raise your hand just to get a sense if there's some educators? Okay, great. If there are school board members or district leaders or district staff or district leaders, okay. Oh, great. And then business leaders, chamber leaders, folks with okay. And engaged citizens, activists, excellent, perfect. Taxpayers, municipal, are there some other municipal leaders like city and county? Okay, great. It just helps me have a little bit of a sense. The educators, it was my very quick formative assessment on what the group might be most helpful to focus on. So I'm going to try to spend most of the time for questions and answers because it is a fairly complicated bill, and obviously the school finance process is pretty complicated, but I do want to try to give you a quick overview so you know what is in there, and then we can focus on the things that are most interesting to you. I will say for the educators in the crowd or for the community activists or leaders, we've all probably been at that dinner table or in that college dorm room, or for us it was a faculty meeting where you sit around saying, what would it take for us to build the world's best education system? Like, what would we need to actually try to turn this into something that would be the envy of the world? And there'll always be some person who will say, well, you know what? The key is it starts with early childhood. You got to have early childhood investment. You got to have early kindergarten investment. Someone will say, well, yeah, but you know what? We still work on this agrarian calendar, so we need to have the opportunity to do longer school days or longer school years if folks want that. And someone will say, oh, well, but you know what? We need to invest in technology because now education is delivered entirely differently than it was 20 years ago. And if we don't have kids ready with those tools, that won't be enough. Others will say, well, the most important thing we have in our system are teachers and principals. You got to invest more in retaining and recruiting the best educators to put in front of kids. Others will say, well, those teachers and principals are working in buildings that are falling apart right now. So you got to find a way to actually invest in capital infrastructure to make sure people have not just buildings that aren't fire hazards, but buildings that actually have 21st century technology. And what you'll find is, over time, we'll say, well, yeah, but to do all those things, it will require more money. Others will say, well, yeah, but to do all those things, you'd have to run the system entirely differently than the way you run it now. And so what this process represents is the actual attempt to do all of those things. About 2 years ago, we started sitting in on all those faculty meetings and chamber conversations and cocktail parties and started taking notes on all the items that were on that list to build that system and try to figure out what it would take to be able to incorporate all of those things into building a world-class education system in Colorado and what sort of reforms to our system you would need to get there and what sort of resources you would need to get there. And so what we have developed or attempted to develop over the last 2 years is a formula that captures those things and a commitment that tries to accelerate our results and our progress. And so let me give you the nuts and bolts of how those things translate, but quickly I'll just say all of the items I just laid out on that list, all of the wish list items, are now all in Senate Bill 213. And so we do three big things, and I'll try for the summary of the 200 pages or so of this bill. The first is we try to modernize the way we fund schools in Colorado. The second is we try to make investments that we know will make the biggest difference. And the third is we try to adapt our system so it is more fair, it is more transparent, and it's more accountable than it has been in the past. So let me say a few things about each of those, and we do have handouts for you if you want them. If you don't want to take notes and don't need to, we'll have some summaries on those. But the couple of things that are significant here, and there's sort of weeds to go in any one of these topics, but I'll give you the short version and happy to talk more about ones that are of interest to you. So the first category of modernizing the formula, what we want to try to do is make sure that every student in Colorado counts every day. Because the system we have now says the way we fund education in the state is we take account of how many students you have in class on October 1st. And for every student you have in class on that one day, we give you $6,000, $7,000, $8,000. Every other day of the year, that student is not worth a single dollar. So whether or not that student is with you September 1st or still with you March 1st, the formula does not care about at all. And so what we've done is created a terrible system where if you are an educator and have a student who comes in from out of district or across the district or out of state in the middle of March or January or December, you never receive a single dollar for educating that student, even though that means there are real services, real costs to support them. So what we've proposed here is changing the formula so that every student counts every day, which means instead of being worth $6,000 in one day and zero the rest, every student is worth essentially $30 every day of the year. So if they stay for half the year and then move, then your district is funded for half the year, and the district that they move to is funded for the second half of the year. And what that allows us to do is to create financial incentives that already match the incentives of all the teachers and principals in the system every day, which is you educate any kid that walks in the door because you know it's the right thing to do. We'd also like you to be able to do it because you have the resources to do it. So when you have a student that comes in January, we actually know you'll get the resources you need to help that student who's going to walk in the middle of the year and need a lot more help. The example I gave the superintendent this morning was, as a principal, I always knew when I was in trouble when the kid walked in to register in January and he comes in like about 9:30 in the morning after classes started and he's wearing a Raiders jersey. Whenever you have a student walking in a Raiders jersey, you know you probably are in trouble. It's a clear sign of early behavior problems. But, you know, the natural incentive as a principal is to look at that student and say, oh, shoot, this is going to be student number 32 in my 10th grade English class, and they're already 6 weeks into the unit, and this guy's been out of school for the last 6 months, so he's got all sorts of additional needs. How are we going to provide those resources? In the past, you just have to make do with it. And that's what teachers and principals do all the time. What we'd like to do is say, have the incentive change, which is when that student walks in the door, I know also coming with him is $4,000 or $5,000 or $6,000 to meet his needs, which means now I can be more creative about how to help him. It also means my first response when I see him is not, oh. My first response is, fantastic, new customer, right? New student, who I can help serve in a really good way. So we're changing the formula now. The second is we are going to provide the opportunity for schools and districts who want to do extended school years or extended school days to help students meet a higher bar for college and career readiness to be able to do that. As part of an innovation fund the state has created, you can either choose to add additional school days or a longer school year to help support the schools and the districts that we know have students struggling the most. And or you could choose to do other interventions that maybe have a better impact even than extended school years and days. We had a lot of educators and parents and communities saying, we have no problem with trying to make our kids reach a higher bar. We don't want to lower the bar for them. We just need more time to get there. So give us that gift of more time. So we'll make that significant change. And the third is we'll make it more flexible for teachers and principals and districts to support students in accessing learning the way that they learn best. So instead of assuming that every piece of knowledge a student's going to get from kindergarten through 12th grade is going to come from within the four walls of that bricks and mortar building, we're going to say education experiences look a lot different now. In the district where I was principal for 4 years, we had a companion high school that was an early college high school where students do internships 3 days a week. Right? So they are doing classroom content 2.5 days, the other 2.5 days they're in a profession of their choosing, doing on-the-ground work to become an architect or a policy advisor or an engineer. And we know districts create those kind of diverse experiences for kids. Right now, districts get punished by doing that. Because if you don't have a student enrolled in a brick and mortar course every single minute of the day, the state just cuts half your funding. So if there are 7 periods of the day, and Susie takes 5 periods and goes to her internship the other 2 periods, we just cut your funding in half. So we're going to say under the new system, give districts the full allocation for those students and empower them to build a learning experience that's much richer. That might include online courses, might include concurrent enrollment, might include internships, might include any diverse combination of things that educators choose to do, but we provide that kind of flexibility locally. So those are the changes to the formula. The second part is we look really long at what are the investments that we know research shows us are having the most significant impact on student performance. And the first one, not surprisingly, maybe the largest impact is early childhood investment. So we know that you can make up to 16 months of gain in a year's time with a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old if you have a half day or a full day programming versus what they would do without it. And so we will now offer full day kindergarten to every student in the state who wants it. And every district that already provides it doesn't lose money for already providing it. They actually get the benefit of our investment to support their investment. We will provide early childhood education for all 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds who we know are the ones most likely to come into kindergarten not yet ready to learn, or at the first grade not yet ready to read. So that we begin to close that gap before it ever even opens in terms of our first graders coming in, and in terms of the interventions that are very, very costly for us. Look at the percentage of special ed referrals that come in grades 1, 2, and 3. So much because those students haven't had access to early content to be able to acquire the skills to read. And so we'll make that early investment in a very significant way. The other one is we'll make sure that we know every child in the state has access to the resources she needs regardless of her needs. And so that means we're making a significant new investment in our students with identified learning disabilities, our special education students. We know we've underfunded those students to the tune of about $500 million across the state. And for those of you who are saying, oh, well, it's not my issue, my student doesn't have special needs, or my school doesn't have many of those students that have them. Well, what happens is, because we've underfunded them to $500 million, and because the state and federal government mandates that you serve those students at whatever their cost is, the way districts meet that need right now, we only give them 20 or 25 cents on the dollar for their total cost. Where they find those other 75 cents is by pulling money from all the rest of the students in the district that they have to serve also. Because they have no choice to not fund them. And so you are both going to make an investment back in the students who have disabilities who need that support. You're also going to make an investment back into the other students whose resources are being pulled to support that federal requirement. So really important across-the-board investment there. We'll make an across-the-board investment in expanding services for gifted and talented students who we currently don't serve really well enough, and for supporting students who are at risk, meaning they're coming in from families of poverty who are most likely to have challenges in school, and they're coming in learning English as a second language. We know those two populations are some of the fastest growing in the state. We are now one of the 3 fastest growing states in the country with percentage of kids in poverty, not a distinction you want to have as a state. And we know that in order to help meet the needs of those students, that's going to require more resources to put behind them. So we'll do those as well. Finally, what will you do to try to make the system more transparent, more fair, and more accountable? A couple other across-the-board investments. One is we know there's a significant need to invest in actual school buildings. We know, I was just down in the San Luis Valley last week looking at a potato barn that is being operated as a high school. Right? And they converted it from high school to potato barn with about zero investment because it already was a potato barn. And what we have are districts across the state, particularly small districts, who have, I know, really just passed their first bond. We have a district I met with yesterday, or 2 days ago, who has $9 million of construction needs just to bring their building up to fire code. So not to build fancy computers or smart boards or wireless internet, just to keep students from being in a building that is against the law is going to require $9 million. The total bonding capacity for that entire district, if they've maxed it out, if their voters tax us every unit of bond that is available in our district, their total capacity is $4 million. So no matter what they ever do in the state, they're $5 million short of even making the building legal to be occupied by kids. And so what has been done in the past in the support of the BEST program, we'll now put about a $500 million new investment into supporting districts around the state that have those needs for facilities and capital construction. We'll make an across-the-board investment in technology for all students in all schools, because we know that's a dramatic need to making sure students have the tools they need to enter and succeed in the 21st century. And we'll also build a reserve fund that we know will be able to be prepared for the next time the recession comes. We don't end up cutting another $1 billion out of K-12 as a result. And so those are all key changes. And then the final part I'll say about fairness is we currently have a system through no one's intention that has become the opposite of what we hoped, which is the way the system works now is because of the overlap of Amendment 23 and the Tabor Amendment and the Gallagher Amendment, the way our schools are funded is that districts with lower and lower property bases are paying higher and higher tax rates. And districts with higher and higher property values are paying lower and lower tax rates. So the examples I give are in Southern Colorado, 2 neighboring districts side by side. One district is paying 27 mills on a $200,000 house, which is the state maximum. It's close to what most of the folks in this room pay. Really, they're around 26. So most districts are here around 26 or 27 mills, statewide maximum. So if you're a $200,000 home in that district, you're paying 27 mills. District next door, same $200,000 house, is paying 3 mills on that house. So you are paying 10 times more of a tax rate on the same value house in a district that is much poorer and generating much less income for your schools as a result. And then after that, the state comes in and backfills local districts. So right now, the state covers about 70% of all education costs. 30 years ago, it used to be that the local districts paid 70% of the cost and the state paid 30%. The state now covers 70%. But it does it without regard to need. So those 2 districts I just mentioned, the one whose taxpayers are paying that great 3 mills on their home, and that district after they pay the 3 mills, now gets 70% of their total costs bought out by the state. The district next door that's paying the state maximum 27 mills gets only 30% of their total costs covered by the state. So you have, if what you wanted to build was a perfect inequality machine, you would have built it. Right? But in everyone's defense, no one intended this to happen this way. It was the result of 25 years of different separate statutory changes and constitutional changes that have made this overlapping mix happen. And now what we want to do is just build a fairer system. It says we ought to fund districts from the state level more based on their need, which is to say, yes, if you are a district that wants to keep your mills at 3 mills because you have enough assessed value to support it, great, you can choose to do that. It is not the obligation of the state to subsidize you to do that when we have the rest of the folks in the state paying 20 or 25 or 27 mills. And so what will happen now is I describe it as it works sort of like it works when you have kids who go to college. Anybody have kids in college right now? Okay. So, you know, when you send your kids to college, you don't call the university and say, so here's how much I would like to pay in tuition, and could you cover the rest? They say, we'll look at your finances, and look at your income, and figure out what your family is capable of paying, and you pay that share, and we'll pay the rest. Or we'll give you access to grants and loans for the rest. So now the formula will look the same way, which is we'll look at what is a local district's assessed valuation per pupil, what is their median income of those earners, because you have some districts that have a lot of value, like ranch land, but very few people with very small incomes, and what is the concentration of poverty. Those 3 things, like your college FAFSA form, will determine how much the state will backfill and what the local need is. So it's now actually a system based in rationality, as opposed to one that just happened by accident, and a very bad accident over a long period of time. And then finally, we'll make sure that we know where every single dollar we spend in the system goes every day. So as a teacher, as a principal, I often wondered sometimes, like, where does all of the dollars go in our system? Because I was a principal of a school of 600 kids in Adams County. We had about 600 kids. Excuse me. Our budget from the state was about $4.3 million. As a principal, I controlled about $60,000 of that budget. So I could make some very bold choices as to whether we were going to buy red pencils or blue pencils. Outside of that, not a lot I could do or my teachers could do to significantly change the trajectory of what we wanted our school to do. We stole all of our ideas from Cooter, who's here, who's done some really courageous work on student-based budgeting. So what we've tried to do is say, let's both let taxpayers know where dollars go down to the school level. So how exactly are we spending your child's $7,000 in the first grade? Some people want to know how much of it goes to transportation or cafeteria or technology or salaries. Some folks want to know how much of it goes to pension. Some folks want to know how much of it goes to district services versus school level services. Well, now as a teacher or a principal or a parent or a taxpayer, you would know exactly where those dollars go. Which means if you want to call your local board member and say, I'm concerned that we're not spending more money on technology, why don't we do that? Or I'm concerned that we're spending $100 per student for this district intervention system that I don't know anything about. Why couldn't we spend that to actually just hire another second grade teacher because my kid's in a class of 32? That now becomes, we'd be the first state in the country where you'd have real-time access to that information and be able to advocate based on it. And then finally, we think we have to know what does it actually cost to build a system that works? And what is our exact return on the investment of the dollars we're putting in? So we don't think it's fair to ask taxpayers to make an investment in our system if we can't tell them exactly where those dollars are going to go and show them exactly what results we've gotten from that investment. So under the new system, you'll be able to see exactly where all the dollars go. We'll be able to show what the results have been linked to each of those funding streams. So for the schools that do extended school days or school years, what kind of results do they get? For the schools that benefit from this mill levy, from the support for small districts who need additional override dollars, what kind of results are they getting? From our special ed investment, what kind of results are we getting? So that people know we're not just investing because we love kids. We're investing because we believe the investment is going to result in a better education for those kids that we love. We'll be able to now track both of those things. One is what investments paid off and which ones didn't, so we can make more of the ones that did and fewer of the ones that didn't. And what do we know the actual cost of our system is? Because every year the system changes, we add more requirements, there's more complexity, there's more need, and we need to have an updated estimate of what those costs of the system are, so we know we're adequately providing the resources that the districts need to be successful. So that's the whole overview of our attempt to try to say, what would it do to finally take that, napkin or scratch piece of paper you sat and tried to build the perfect system on with your friends at dinner or at a faculty meeting or in a late beer, and actually put that into a formula that delivers the things we need. And so we've tried to build a system to do that. What we know is to do it requires two things. It's both going to require more revenue to be able to provide these results, and it's going to require changing the way we spend that revenue, so we invest it, we think, more wisely and more shrewdly with real results to show for it. So that's the proposal we've tried to lay out. And I will stop there, and then happy to take questions, comments, concerns, anything that you would love to hear more about. If there's something that you've heard about that I haven't mentioned, I'm happy to talk about that as well. I wanted to leave the bulk of time for you to ask your questions.